Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Again, I'm apologizing for my voice. It's not as bad as it was this morning, but I am still dealing with a horrible cold and trying to get work done, trying to do voiceovers, so we'll see how this one goes. Today's card is for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge, which I will have linked to. I'll have linked below the video to my blog post, which will have a link to the challenge. And on my computer, I saw the one color is more purple, but it's really, I guess, more of a blue, but as always, somewhat open interpretation. And I decided in my, cold syrup type stupor to try some no-line watercoloring, which I've actually done another card with some no-line coloring. I just have not edited the video and uploaded it yet. So this is basically like my second attempt. And I'm using simpler images in a sense that these are not like super realistic flowers. I thought the simpler shapes would be a little bit easier. So what I did was create some masks with the My Favorite Things Scribble Roses stamp set. I had stamped them onto just some post-it tape and then trimmed them out with scissors. And then I laid out the flowers with those masks themselves, and then stamped the flowers onto some distress watercolor cardstock with the same ink. And I'm just using the Tattered Rose Distressing, just a really light color. And once I stamped them, I used those masks yet again so that I could stamp the stems and the leaves, again, all in the same ink. You want, when you're doing the no-line watercolor look, you want to use a really light ink that is basically going to disappear, or the other colors are going to take over as you color it. So once I had all my stamping, I'm going to remove those masks, and I had taped the watercolor paper to my little cutting board with some painter's tape. And then I'm just going to use 3 different colors of distressing to watercolor these in. I'm not going to be super technical with this, do like a bunch of shading and that sort of thing. I was just going to experiment and see if this would even turn out. With these flower images, this is a good one, I think, in my opinion, to experiment with because there's so many areas. Because the big thing with no-line watercolor is you can only do one spot at a time, and you want to do areas that are not touching because you have to let them dry before you go on to the next spot. So with these, since I'd stamped all 3 flowers, I was able to just go along and fill in each little area, and then I'd go back to the original flower and fill in the next area. So by the time I got to the 3rd flower, the areas on the first one were dry, if that makes sense. Because the big thing with no-line watercoloring is you need to have patience, and that's something I'm not very good at. So doing it this way, I didn't have to manually dry each area or wait for them to dry. I was able to just kind of consistently go along and fill in each area. So I just used my silver size 2 brush, and I'd squished the ink pad, the distressing pad. This is just the stamp packaging that I had the stamp set in. So I used that as my palette. And once I did all of the flowers and they were completely dry, I went on and did the stems. And for that, I used Mowed Lawn Distress Ink, and I did the exact same thing. I did one area at a time and let each piece dry, and then went in and filled in the other parts. So with these, it was just the leaves that have little outline areas in that, so it gives them all that different definition. So really, really fun. I just kind of zoned out as I did it. And then as a final step, when they were all done, I took my largest brush, which for me is the silver size 6 brush, and got it really, really wet with clean water. And I wet the area around, trying to be really, really careful not to dampen any of the edges of the flowers or the leaves. And then I used some mustard seed ink to kind of create a bit of a, background and halo effect around the images and let it fade out. And then I took a big risk once it was all dry and actually spritzed it with my distress sprayer. I was a little hesitant to do it because I'm like, knowing my luck, I'm going to get a big splotch and destroy this. But it worked. So I sprayed it. I didn't let it sit for very long. Normally I let that sit for, 30 seconds or so. And then, you sop it up with the paper towel. But this time I only let it sit for a few seconds, and it reacted almost instantly. So again, once that was dry, I actually covered the flowers again with those masks, and then picked up that mustard seed with a wet brush and just flicked that over. I didn't want the mustard seed flicked on top of the purple flowers because yellow and purple generally don't make a very nice color. So I'd, use that. And then same thing. Once that was dry, I actually this time used some Copic opaque white, and I mixed it with some water and flicked the paintbrush again across my fingers just to create some white splatters, just to finish it off even more. I was really just having fun with the whole thing. So once everything was completely dry, I peeled off the painter's tape, and if you peel off the tape, like basically almost fold it back on top of itself, that generally mean like it'll peel off without tearing the cardstock. So I usually just go slow and steady, and you guys have seen in some of my other videos, I end up, I have torn cardstock, but I make it work. But this time it went perfect, thank goodness. So I did that, and then I ran this through my Big Shot with the largest die from the Blueprints 1 Dynamic. So it cut off those edges that had been taped off and just looked funny. And once those were die cut, I die cut the word thank you 3 times from some white cardstock. This is also a die from MFT. And my original plan was to leave them all white. And then looking at it, I was like, oh, just because, I'd done that card that I just posted where I'd sponged the sentiment. So I thought of doing the same thing, but this time with the green ink. So I put one of the die cuts back into the scrap of cardstock just to hold them in place. So I could sponge a bit more of that Mode Lawn Distress ink just from the bottom, kind of going up. So it just fades onto the white. So the scrap of the die cut just holds that in place. Otherwise, it's really hard to sponge really finicky, fine detailed die cuts like this without wrinkling them or taking a ton of time. So once I was happy with that, I'm going to adhere all these together with my Ranger Multi-Medium Matte Adhesive. And I've got that fine tip applicator on there. So this takes me no time at all. Like how I lived before I got this applicator, I don't even know. I always link to it when I link to the supplies. I link to the Multi-Medium Matte Adhesive, and then the applicator bottle is separate. And just as an FYI, I just took the tip of the bottle off of the empty one and stuck it on the Multi-Medium Matte Adhesive. Simple as that. So then I wanted to add some ribbon to my card. So I have some MAYART. So this is 3/8 inch. This is yellow gingham ribbon. And wrap that around my card front. And I stick my fingers into the loops of the bows and use my other fingers to kind of adjust. For some people, I know that's kind of difficult, but I've tied hundreds and hundreds of bows over the last decade or so of making cards. So I don't even think about it, but that's where the reverse tweezers, which I've shown in other videos, come in handy. And again, even though I'm so sick and I feel like crap, this card was just flowing. Like things were coming together and the bow tied so nicely. The watercoloring turned out. It was like, what the heck? Why doesn't it always work like this? Because trust me, it doesn't. It's usually the miracles of video editing that it makes everything look so seamless. But yeah, today it just did. So I got that bow on there, and then I adhered the sentiment, the die cut sentiment, and then as a final little bit of embellishment, I've got these Pretty Pink Posh, the small and large clear droplets. Those I just tend to gravitate towards, especially when I'm doing like floral images, because to me they just make me think of like raindrops. So I added 3 of those, and I adhered them with the same Multi-Medium Matte Adhesive. And then I grabbed another piece of white cardstock to use on the inside of the card, and I stamped the flowers, just 2 of the flowers this time, with that same purple ink. That was the Wilted Violet ink that I'd used to watercolor with, and mask those off with those same masks, because I'll use the same mask over and over again. I'm going to keep those masks with the stamp set, so the next time I use the stamp set, I've already got the masks cut out. So I left the masks on and then stamped the stems and the leaves with the green ink, and then peeled off the mask. And then my sentiment is the coordinating My Favorite Things Kind Thanks stamp set that coordinates with that die I used on the front. And I was going to line it up and use an acrylic block, and then reminded myself I've got the mini Misty for a reason. I paid all this money for it, so I better, make use of it. So lined up the inside of the card there in the mini Misty, and then used my little clear grid sheet to line up that sentiment so it was perfectly straight, which is good because this was a brand new sentiment set, and sometimes they don't stamp perfectly when they're brand new, so it doesn't show up as much on camera, but in real life I was not happy with it. So I inked it up twice, stamped it twice, then it was perfect, so yay for the Misty there. So once I got the inside finished, I can adhere the outside, so I used a bunch of foam tape to adhere the watercolor panel to my card base, which I made from MFT's Green Room cardstock. That was a pretty close match to the Distress Mode Lawn color that I used. So adhered the front with foam tape, the inside with my ATG so it was flat, And that finished off the card. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I will have a link below the video to my blog post, which will have a link to the color challenge if you're interested in playing along, as well as links to all the supplies used. All that sort of info is in the description box below, so check that out if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye.